I think the first step is to make sure that vehicles you've actually got are needed, and that seems like an obvious thing to say, but I frequently come across fleets, and the discussion we had over lunch indicated it's a common issue that there are perhaps sometimes more vehicles on a fleet due to the way that a fleet may be managed or an organisation may be managed.
I'm Catherine Williams, I'm Fleet Manager at the Environment Agency. The Environment Agency, for people that don't know, we're a non-departmental public body, come under the DEFRA umbrella. We manage the Environment Agency's fleet, and as the largest fleet holder in the DEFRA group, we also manage fleets for the other organisations within DEFRA. So we've got quite a large fleet, and we've got quite a complex fleet with lots of different kind of purposes and uses. So we have probably around 4,000 company cars. Probably around 1,500 vans, under 3.5 tonne and 4x4s. We have HGVs and we have plants and boats as well. So we've got quite a really varied kind of...
If it moves, you've got it.
We're also in the process alongside that of changing the choice list. At the moment you can get an electric or a plug-in hybrid. From July it's going to be a pure electric list.
We're just about to change the car list again to BEV only from 2024. We are the first company to sign up to science-based targets, so we are audited on our carbon. We have a robust carbon structure to be net zero by 2040. We have got HGVs that are electric, so we've got some Mercedes Canters, we've got an Electra 27-tonne powered access vehicle. We've just starting to bring in 150 EV transits. We've already got some Maxus transits as well.
We're reducing our fleet just based on the initial results from telematics. Because you give a department a car and they think it's theirs. And of course telematics said, well, you've got all this fleet that actually for 23 hours a day it just sits in that car parking space. So of course my fleet manager, he's had all the pushback, is removing all the cars from our biggest divisional station, replacing them with about a dozen, and if you need to go out, you take the first set of keys of the first charged car.
So I work for Energy Saving Trust on the fleet support team. So our mission as the Energy Saving Trust is to address the climate emergency by trying to be a catalyst for making decarbonisation happen quicker. So the fleet team, there's 6 of us in the fleet team. Was at last count, I think everybody's quit since the last had a team meeting. Sounds ominous. I'm joking. We're funded by DFT, and the fleet team basically exists to support fleets to accelerate their decarbonisation. So I get to see all sorts of fleets and work with all sorts of fleets, whether it's local authorities, whether it's big organisations, whether it's government fleet commitment work, and so really get to see what people are doing well and then try and apply that into other fleets as well. So through the programme of fleet advice, I may undertake a fleet review which will look comprehensively at what's going on and where decarbonisation can take place, whether that's through better operations. I'm sure Rich is going to talk a lot about things like telematics and how that all fits in, or whether it's electrification, whatever it might be, to sort of and I was heartened to hear you talking about reducing the fleet size, and actually there's a lot of people who have a lot more vehicles than they need, so that embedded carbon is another thing that you don't always see on the bottom line, but it's certainly something to consider. So it's a holistic view of a fleet, and really taking the best of what we know. Everybody does something well, and most fleets do something badly, so it's taking auditing the fleet and coming up with recommendations where people can improve and decarbonise, and usually saving money and decarbonising can go together, obviously not always with high energy costs, but we like to give the whole picture of a fleet.
From the telematics side, and specifically I'll stick within the EV space and the decarbonisation, we have developed a strategy, and at the very bottom of that strategy is actually, I'm going to call it collaboration, and a lot of people talk about it when we talk about what's needed about collaborating different organisations. But we know we're only one part of the cog of all the different specialisms that a fleet requires to bring through. So how can we support that and not be standalone and outside of it?
And you can also use the telematics to understand the energy consumption, as long as they're CAN bus connected, of the current diesel fleet. So speaking specifically about a transition to electric here, you can then model the likely energy consumption of the future electric fleets. Now that could be through telematics and fuel data using a factor, an efficiency factor to move to electric, or it could be using software.
Realistically, the basic metrics are the same. You want fuel, well, you want energy consumption, and we're getting those. So we can get regenerative braking, we can see all the performance of that, we can see live battery levels and everything, and that's kind of like the basics and doing the insights. Where it starts to get really interesting for us, and it's really comforting to hear the sorts of things that you've been saying, is and for us, it requires a lot of investment, it requires a lot of time. So like you guys phasing in your change, we're trying to phase in and get the really sophisticated stuff coming in at the right time as and when fleets have done it. So I guess our nearest big project which will deliver is smart charging. So it links to what Paul was saying on the Drax side of it. In one where you've got an OCPP charger, we are now, and it's live in pilot, we'll be live with it for the customers in about Q3 this year, whereby the charging infrastructure and the vehicles will sit in one visible platform, and you'll be able to manage the charging of the vehicle at knowing what its requirements for the next day are and planning it based on CO2 footprint, if that's, managing the grid, whether it's tariffs, all across the things we've talked about today is the difficulties with the charging. And then the next phase, and then what it's already in pilot, is battery analytics. So again, the light touch stuff that we're seeing at the moment through majority potentially of AC charging at depots, we know potentially doesn't have significant long-term consequences for the battery health. And some of the conversations we've heard from the battery analytics people that we're working with are suggesting that when we get into the truck world, we may find that ferry companies may want you to have a battery health certificate to go on the ferry. If you're going into a lorry park, you've done it. So what's really important, the work we're doing is around, with 3 or 4 months data and usage, can you predict forward when certain cells will start to decay, and then you can plan to change before you hit catastrophic decaying of the vehicles. So much data. The challenge for people and organisations is to pull it to something that's insightful, that gives you an actionable view of something you can do with, and it's the sources of it, and it is a real challenge. I mean, I think there's some figure out at the moment. In the last 2 years, there's more data being produced than every book or everything else that's ever come before.
I'm going to come over to Richard because we've kind of touched on the behavioural stuff.
Well, yeah, I was just this is about planning, right? And the one really obvious omission from any of our conversation this morning has been the driver, and the transition of taking the driver from a mechanical instrument with 4 wheels to a technological instrument with 4 wheels, and really shouldn't underestimate the impact, because the driver is the only one who will deliver the results of that vehicle back to the business. They're the ones who've got their right foot on the accelerator or the brake, and we see it all the time. And we talk about decarbonisation. You can work with drivers now and do the simple stuff. Take payload out, make sure the tyres are inflated, do one trip less, do better MPG. Will all take your carbon footprint down here today. And then when you do move them into an electric vehicle, teach them how to get the most out of that technology for the benefit of the business. And it's the training.
I would actually add to that, there are still fleets, irrespective of whether they're driving an EV, a plug-in hybrid or an ICE, who say, there you are, Mr. Van Driver, there's your keys, on you go.
Can I bring Catherine into the conversation? Because I have no doubt that you've done all this great stuff around staff engagement, driver training, You've got a very high penetration of battery electric vehicles in your fleet, right? You're still getting pushed back. And as more and more people flip across to battery electric, the ones that are left, they really are going to become the hard to reach group. What strategies have you got for people who really are resistant to technology change, and how, You know, how are you going to overcome it?
I think it is difficult and we're still working on it. We haven't got the answers. We definitely haven't got the answers. One thing that we are doing is we are trying to support the drivers as much as possible. So we've got we're running focus groups so that when teams are due to be getting the electric vehicles in, we run focus groups with them before. We talk about the concerns. We find out what they need from us, what support will help them to make that transition. We show them where they can access lots of different resources, so training and just to help to address some of those fears.
One of the best ways to get it is get a group of your worst people who don't want an EV vehicle and take them on a manufacturer's day. Let them drive them, let them see how they work, let them see what they do. And they're the ones who then go out saying, you know what, these aren't that bad, they're actually quite good.
Yeah. And we are looking at doing things like getting people to do sort of vlogs and things like that, to say like, oh, I've had a new EV and this is my experience. And it is interesting because you do find generally that even some of the most adamantly against getting an EV drivers, once they've driven it and experienced that EV,
They don't go back.
they love it.
They don't go back.
Very rarely anybody drives an EV and goes, this is horrible.
But I still,
We now have around just over 2/3 of our sites with infrastructure. We are going through a modernisation programme, which is adding EV as part of that modernisation, and by 2025 all sites will have infrastructure, not available to the public, I have to add. And our strategy objective is that all non-blue light vehicles will be EV by 2025.
One of the biggest challenges we do have to support that fleet is the charging infrastructure. I'm sure everybody is probably going to have similar issues. We're on phase 5 now of putting charging into our depots and offices. We've got around 250. So we do have our charging infrastructure, but it's nowhere near enough. And the projects that we've got to move that forward aren't necessarily moving as quickly as we'd like them to move. There's lots of delays. I'm sure you all know the pain in installing large banks of chargers in offices. Sometimes we own them, sometimes we're leasing them. That there is just so many issues in doing that.
Drax is a global organisation. Canada, North America, the UK and Asia. Our kind of core business, if you like, is electricity generation. So we're an electricity company at heart, that's what we do. We've got a number of kind of generation assets. So from converting our fossil fuel burning at the Drax power station, we converted them into biomass, and the tactical combination of BECCS, carbon capture and storage, whether that means anything to the group. But ultimately, the power station in York is the largest single site decarbonisation project in Europe. And in that generation process, we've removed 99% of our Scope 1, Scope 2 emissions within that generation process. And Drax, probably worth noting, aims to be carbon negative by 2030, which is massive. So we're a key kind of player in the UK electricity system. Just hearing about some of the challenges around the room today, absolutely there's nothing new under the sun. We kind of hear it all daily in terms of customers' challenges and what they're trying to achieve. So I specifically work within a division that EV charging infrastructure. So I've been supporting businesses of all sizes, all sectors for the past 4 years, thinking about where are you on your electrification journey? What stage are you at? What you're trying to achieve? Have you got electric vehicles? Have you got charging infrastructure? And mapping out that whole process for them. So really helping a customer build that strategy, implement it, execute on it, and kind of manage the solutions they're on. So any infrastructure that we install, electricity infrastructure, EV charging infrastructure, we become the CPO, the charge point operator. So we command and control and manage those charge points that go in, all the back office software, wherever the use case is, whether it be taking contactless payments, whether it be taking app payments, wherever the solution, load management, we manage all of that process for our clients. Lots of our competitors come into the market focused on hardware, focused on software, focused on the vehicles. Okay, the most important driver for this is the kilowatt. And that's kind of our area of expertise. Future-proofing isn't just thinking what you need today, and thinking about the types of solutions and use cases for those vehicles today. It's thinking about when you spend that amount of money, in 10, 15 years' time, that needs to be fighting fit and able to deliver your operational objectives. It can't impact your core business, whether you're a water company, a police station, fire and rescue. It cannot impact your core business, because guess what? as much as the investment for EV charging infrastructure, any impact or deficiency in your core business is going to cost you as well, customer brand experience and things like that. So when we're helping customers, it's not just think about the today's view or the yesterday's view. It's what's it going to look like in 5-10 years time. So the question for all businesses is, you know that there's challenges in terms of constraints on your sites, on your buildings, legacy buildings, and the D&O level, and the UK level. So you need to be thinking about that flexibility. So one of the key things we do is, again, it's making sure that anything you install today can be future-proofed. So we work with a range of kind of charge point manufacturers, all OCPP compliant. So let's just say, for example, we have a water company with rapid chargers and slow AC chargers. They can be all next to each other. We can command and control them all, disparate systems, different hardwares, bring them together in one centralised location. But the key thing is it's that flexibility piece. So forget what it is today about plugging in and taking kilowatts. What about when there's going to be more demand on what's happening in the building and the grid, and you can't take them kilowatts and you might need to put them back in. It's where V2G or V2X charging comes in. What you find with certain hardware manufacturers is that they lock you into a specific back office, a specific software at the back. The one you mentioned, I won't mention the name, they are notorious for that, in the sense that if I want to put that particular unit in Liverpool, and actually we put 15 in and we don't like them, and you wanted to put something in Manchester, you'd have to put the same hardware solution in, because it's tied you into the back office,
Or you run into back offices.
or two different back offices.
The problem we have is that we also have very aged depots that at the moment are under desire to rebuild and redesign, but that isn't stamped off, signed off, and we're not as yet sticking a spade in the ground. But the designs to take us there all include what the future potential gives us. So it's in the build designs, it's in the thought process, but we haven't yet got it. And as a result that we haven't got it, I can't now go and buy the next 33 RCVs all electric from one of the manufacturers, premium brands out there with them. I can't go and buy those because I can't roll 33 into the one site and then plug them all in.
We found it was costing us a significant amount of money to continue with free charging. When it was actually worked out what it was costing, it was soon changed to pay for your own. And people did that. It's still used quite well. We've got 40 charging points within that car park. What I will say is capacity starts to become an issue. When we built that hospital, and as I say, it's a very new hospital, we put 25% spare capacity on the energy system within there for future growth, and that's pretty much been taken up with those charging points.
We have started working on the electric fleet, but we're not where we want to be at the present moment. We're finding out what we can have, because a company came out a while ago and they've quoted like maybe for a substation of £1 million, and as Dave knows, our income is not private business, it's taxpayers' money, so it's you've got to watch what you spend and what you're spending it on.
But the significant code review came in at the beginning of this month. This is where the DSOs, so the distribution system operators, can no longer pass those charges on to the end customer. And my question is, how aware is people of this? Because I'm not hearing it being talked about a lot. Everyone I speak to, I'm like, if you had a quote 2 years ago and you shelved it because you couldn't afford the upgrade, go back, ask for a re-quote. Now, what's your view on this? What's your experience? Are you hearing anything about it?
It's all really new at the moment. It's the DESNZ basically. So it's about customers wanting additional capacity for EV charging, being charged the connection and voltage amounts from the D&O. So as Kate mentioned, the D&O passing those costs on. Civils, MIC increases the whole lot.
Substation upgrade.
I was going to say, can we try break some of the acronyms, because these are new for me, so that would be really helpful.
Capacity increases. So whatever MPAN you've got an ASC and an available supply capacity associated with that MPAN that determines how much power you can draw into that meter. Okay, so you've got a limit set by the DNO and your supplier, electricity supplier. You can increase that, it goes to the DNO. If there's spare capacity, sometimes it can just be done by changing something on the computer screen. Sometimes there's more technical work that needs to happen at a local level. But ultimately, what they're doing is they're bringing something out which is going to be kind of amortising the costs across the whole community, not domestic community, but businesses community. So if you wanted access to a substation to increase the power to put 20 new charge points in, it's going to be socialised, these costs. So whereas historically it's been, well, if Paul George Limited goes to Electricity North West and says I need an extra 100 amp capacity, they're going to say, well, we need this, it's £100,000, Paul. It's going to be socialised across regions now.
It's kind of timing where we're urgent about it, and we think it might come quickly, is through the Scope 3 reporting and the legislation. There's some legislation that came into play last year called the TFCD. It was brought in 5th, 6th of April by the FCA, and it requires basically the biggest 1,300 businesses in the UK to start reporting their climatic impact through their financial disclosures. So what's that mean in reality? It means that where those organisations have a significant Scope 3 carbon footprint, they will be asking their suppliers upstream and downstream to provide not only the carbon footprint for the fulfilment of that contract, but also the action plans to reduce the impact of that carbon footprint. So whilst this legislation was at this really high, 500 million turnover, 500 employees businesses, it's very quickly starting to drag in smaller organisations, and we're seeing, and that's typically our customer base. Our average fleet size in the UK, whilst we run 106,000, our average fleet size is 25, and for those organisations, they're suppliers into these big guys, and all of a sudden they're not ready yet for this, and they're getting dragged in. And some of those organisations, from the people I've spoken to, have suggested that we'll work with those supply chain. They'll be collaborative with them to help them. Others are mandating, and basically contracts will be exposed if they can't do it.
We've actually got quite a small fleet as such within and that's true for every NHS hospital these days. That we have the small number of vehicles we have that go between sites. Most services are contracted out, and as part of our net zero plans, we have written into those contracts that they have to meet certain net zero commitments within the companies that we it's one of our tender requirements. I'm sure every council and company would be of a similar basis to that.
We're going to get a few jealous stares here because we've only got a small fleet compared to most people. Have about 80 vehicles. We only actually own one vehicle. Our vehicles are contracted out to a third party who supply the vehicles on 2 contracts. So we've got one contract who supplies with the RCVs, refuse collection vehicles and vans, and we've got another supplier who supply with the plant machinery as well. So when we went into contract with the present suppliers, that was 2 years ago, we didn't have the infrastructure for electric fleet. So we only got one van, electric van, out of the 80 vehicles. But we are working closely with the supplier now to look for the future, look at our depot infrastructure, as well as look at vehicles. We've had a couple on trial.
It was at the UK Logistics UK decarbonisation event in October last year, and I spoke to the ESG manager for a massive haulier and logistics business, and she explicitly said, we have 10,000 suppliers, we have to report, and we are going to report all our Scope 3 emissions, and the first thing we will do is cull.
Take away the fact that if technology allowed us, if the depots allowed us, the cost is something which as yet has to be addressed. I looked last year at the gully vehicles for it, and I stood with the manufacturer of the Whale product that was full EV. That product was over £500,000 for one truck, and only one manufacturer of that chassis could make the chassis that could allow Whale to build onto that truck, which becomes very uncompetitive on that marketplace. So that truck is sub £200,000 to go and buy under normal circumstances, and that was last year's CV show. I should just think what it is if they could get that chassis and it could be built at this year's prices. But you look at all of that through all of the fleet, and until that starts to become something that can be accessed properly and financed in an industry where, as you've just said, the cuts will kill it.
The obviously additional purchase cost of the electric vehicle will have a cost, but you should quite easily understanding accurate energy consumption to be able to model what that's going to look like on a
That has changed since we did
TCR.
ours sort of 2 years ago, and the energy bills have gone that way.
Yeah.
You know, that bit where at the end of its life it's sort of cost neutral because of the police cost and everything else. That's now it's costing more money than a normal vehicle to run now. And then they're going to start taxing cars, aren't they, from 2025? How long's congestion in London going to be free for electric vehicles? That ain't going to last forever, is it? We'll start charging you for that. So that cost is just creeping up and will creep up.
If you're a business that buys rather than leases your vehicle, and that's in your finances and in your structure,
Yeah.
there is still that price
Yes.
there, and that is still a hurdle. That is for a business, and I'm just saying that as irrespective of what the difference between an EV and an internal combustion or a plug-in, you have ICE, plug-in, EV. You only look at it in some models of cars, and you can now look at it with some models of vans now. There is that three-step.
You're modelling at the moment a comparative between the three options. After
Yeah, but
the
if you're a
mod-
capital purchaser,
It is, but even after when those options disappear, you were modelling different brands
Yeah.
of only that one category.
Brief thought. I want to thank everyone for their enthusiasm and contribution and dialogue today, because we've done others where there haven't been the level of interaction. Personally, I've learned a shed load from everyone around the challenges, and it's given, one of our challenges as a cog in the wheel of helping everyone enable them to transition and providing data is to know what the challenges are, so the right data is getting produced at the right time and in the right formats going forward that help you make decisions. So thank you all for all of the acronyms as well. I've got a few more to but yeah, I hope you've all got something out and shared along the dialogue as well today, because that's ultimately what it's all about, is helping everyone move forward. So thank you.
Thank you.